Hey, how's it going, everybody? Shaun here for a quick, kind of just off the cuff, extemporaneous movie review. Today, we're going to be talking about The Matrix Resurrections. It came out the other day. The Matrix is now a Christmas movie. Came out around Christmas time. We can put it into the Christmas canon. Or can we? Or should we? Or what is it? What is The Matrix? That's what everybody wants to know. What is The Matrix? So, I am a fan of the first movie. And even kind of I would say a mild fan of the sequels. I think Reloaded is a pretty okay movie. I think, the problem with the sequels isn't really so much like the story itself per se. It's a lot in the execution. They're very verbose. They're bloated. It's like, The Matrix was such a big, huge success. It was so influential. It had so much sway with culture and the zeitgeist and filmmaking that Warner Brothers just kind of went to them and the Wachowskis gave them a blank check almost. And you can see the danger of that because, necessity is the mother of invention. And when you just have everything given to you, it's easy to fall to excess. And I think in large part, that's probably what happened to the Matrix sequels, kind of just broadly speaking, is that they're just excessive. For every cool action scene that there is or set piece, oftentimes they just go on too long. And then once you kind of get to the end of the first Matrix, there's really not a lot you can do. Once you create Superman, once you create a god, the Ubermensch, it's really hard to kind of divine a story that's going to make it feel like there's stakes. There's real stakes to the world. I remember back in the day, between Reloaded and Revolutions, where we were all kind of guessing, we were all kind of speculating that oh, no, Zion, the real world is actually just another layer of the Matrix. We thought that would be the coolest concept because if people remember at the end of Reloaded, there's a trailer for Revolutions, but there's kind of the slight implication that Neo is also somewhat powerful within the real world. There is something extraordinary about him. He's not just special in the Matrix as somebody that's some great mind that can understand how to bend the code of the Matrix. No, he's also got powers, for lack of a better way to put it. It's actually pretty silly. It's pretty silly. So I remember speculating with my friends, and we would talk and joke around, and we really thought that's really what we thought it was going to be. That would be the twist. It would be the reveal. It's oh, you're actually just still in the Matrix, which, in a grand metaphorical sense, it's true because it's all about structures of control and how that affects people's lives and blah, blah, blah. And so now we come to The Matrix Resurrections, this way after the fact sequel that acknowledges the fact that it's a way after the fact sequel, acknowledges the fact that there is something cynical in nature about making a sequel to a completed trilogy. But the problem with The Matrix Resurrections, I would say in large, broad strokes, is that it's content with just asking questions. Doesn't care about answers at all. Not to suggest that you have to answer every question, but... And this gets, I think actually The Matrix has a lot of these problems too, just the original trilogy, is that it's really just not, you're not smart or interesting or subversive just because you bring something up. You have to do something interesting with it. I think Matrix Resurrections, it almost gets there. I would say just, I actually enjoyed it. I enjoyed it for what it was. It's not as good as The Matrix, the first one, but it kind of eschews a traditional sequel and goes and does completely its own thing. It has its own vibe, its own tone, its own pace, its own feel. It feels different. Honestly, I kind of wish that Lana Wachowski had not directed it. I think if you wanted to make the ultimate meta Matrix sequel, you should have done this script, but directed by a Matrix superfan. I think that would have maybe added a different interesting meta layer to the whole process, but I guess that's kind of neither here nor there. But yeah, I think oftentimes the movie, it tries to have its cake and eat it too, and I don't think it's always super successful in that. I really liked coming back to it though. I enjoyed coming back Keanu. This is actually one of his better performances in the past few years. Him and Carrie-Anne Moss actually have legit chemistry in this movie, whereas I think in the original trilogy, I thought they were kind of very cold. I know intellectually we're supposed to see that they're in love, and that's the thrust of the story. It's their love story. I just never really bought into it. I thought they just kind of felt cold towards each other, which is just a normal thing. Not everybody has like natural chemistry with a person. But since the years have gone by and they've gotten older and matured and life experience, they seem like they've very comfortably settled into a relationship. Because now, since in the time between making those movies and now, they've actually maintained something of a friendship. Like they talk to each other, off and on throughout the years. And they keep up to date with each other and share stuff about their families and stuff. So they actually have a real life relationship. And I think it shows in their performances, and it does kind of elevate what's going on with their characters. Oh, excuse me. Still got some coof left inside of me. Let me see here. Where was I? Yeah. So those are the things that I think are cool about it. I think a lot of like the meta stuff works way better than maybe you would think it would, or maybe even has any right to a certain degree. I wish that it had focused more on some of the things that they bring up in the meta sense. There's a lot of like really interesting concepts. Like actually the movie starts with this whole thing with like the modal and the new Morpheus and all that kind of stuff. And the way that the new Morpheus kind of comes into being and the nature of the Agent Smith program and Morpheus and what like Anderson/Neo had done to kind of like, this is not really a spoiler. It happens in the first 15 minutes. So I'm just going to say it because I think it's like one of the coolest things in the movie that I wish was explored further or kind of meant more at the end was that like Neo subconsciously creates an AI Morpheus that's part Agent Smith, part Morpheus, because it goes into like kind of like this unity thing that you can't just have good and bad. There doesn't exist that way. You have to find symbiosis. Everything is about a team effort. Everything is about connectivity. Everything is about relationships, for lack of a better way to put it. And so he like Anderson has like a little bit of Smith and Morpheus merged into a character from this video game version of the Matrix that the movie says that he's like the developer of. And it was super fascinating because he like creates his own savior, for lack of a better way to put it. He creates the thing subconsciously that's going to pull him out of the Matrix. And I thought that was pretty cool. I'm going to have to touch on a few mild spoilers. I don't think they're a big deal. You might think they're a big deal, but I would say this. I enjoyed it more than I think some people are going to. It's definitely not for everybody. It has a lot of pacing issues, especially in the second act. And the action, that's something actually I can talk about without spoiling anything. The action is very subpar. Very like bad Netflix show action. And especially, like, you got to think, we live in a post-Matrix world. We live in a post-The Raid and John Wick world. Like, doing this kind of, like, half-assed fucking choreography and quick cutting and all this garbage, it just did not work. Most of it didn't work at all. Excuse me. And I watched it twice. So, especially on the second time, I really, really noticed how bad the action scenes were. I was surprised how like lackluster the set pieces were in general. They're not very inspired, maybe save except for like a few moments here or there, like at the end of the movie. For as bloated and crazy as say something like the freeway chase scene or the chase scene in Matrix Reloaded, while I think it's like way too long and excessive and not necessary, a lot of it's not necessary. It's never boring and it's never not impressive. This would just be boring. It's just like tedious. And you're just waiting until they're like, okay, or just like let's get to the exposition part of the fight while you're talking to each other. Let's just get to it. You kind of just want to be done and over with it. But like I said, I like weird meta movies. I like filmmakers that swing for the fences, even if they don't fully connect. I'd rather watch an interesting failure than a mediocre phoned-in thing, which I will say, this is not a phoned-in movie. It's not. It goes in a direction that I think a lot of people aren't going to like, but it's not it's not super cheap or cynical or just trying to recapture the feeling or the spirit of the originals. It respects that trilogy enough to kind of just let it be its own thing. And they're like, no, we're doing something new. We're doing something completely different. And whether you like that or not, well, that's going to be on you. It's a science fiction romance story with meta commentary about the legacy of the Matrix, heroes and how people engage with the material that they consume. Just lots of stuff like that. I wish some of that stuff was just explored more. There's a lot of interesting territory there that it kind of just like touches on. Get the hell out of here. Christmas hat. But like a lot of the just touches on them and it doesn't explore them very deeply, and it's kind of like frustrating. It's more frustrating in this than it was like in the older Matrix movies, because at least in those movies, like you're distracted by, the kind of mind-blowing set pieces and special effects and all that stuff. And in this one, I was just kind of like, oh, okay. I mean, that's really cool. Is this going to come back around in a meaningful way? And it just kind of never did. Okay, so just for a few spoilers, a little bit of spoilers. So there's a new Zion. It's called Io. Niobe is there. Jada Pinkett Smith is back. She's back, baby. She's back as Niobe. I've never liked the character Niobe. She was just kind of actually, I wouldn't even say liked or disliked. I just had no opinion about her. And I still have no opinion about her. Zero. I think Jada Pinkett Smith is not a very good actress. And her, like, doing this old lady thing was just kind of whatever. I understand, like, functionally why she's there. I understand everything that happens in the real world. Again, this kind of goes into this whole, like, the nature of what a hero is and what makes a hero. Are you a hero if nobody believes in you? Do you have to have fans to actually be a hero? Kind of deals with things like that. It starts talking about that kind of stuff. But again, it doesn't really do much with it. What else was I going to say? And I did like the whole tact about just like because it's talking, Lana Wachowski is a trans person, and so it's dealing with a lot with like, gender binaries or just the nature of binaries in general. It's interesting because Lana Wachowski is like an older trans person, maybe not quite as inundated with the kind of the gender fluidity that we live in today. Now because if you were a trans person, you were just like, yeah, I believe in a gender binary because I want to be on the other side of it. I want to be on the other side of it. I believe that the other side of it exists. I think it's important. I identify with that. That's what I want to be. There's none of this kind of like gray area nebulous stuff. And it was way less kind of politically woke than I expected it to be. It's definitely like queer coded, as they would say. There's a lot of like, a lot of queer stuff in the movie, but it's, it's made by a trans woman. So what do you expect? But it's not proselytizing and it's not preaching. It doesn't try to beat you over the head with it. There's going to be some stuff that definitely makes people cringe or roll their eyes. There's like some gamer bro stuff stand in, but I think more of that stuff was not like necessarily attacking like gamers, because the nerds got very offended about that stuff. I think it's just talking about the nature of like commercialization and product and consumers and how people are kind of just get caught in kind of stereotypes and cycles because of those things. And it makes it difficult for them to like act mature, grow up, whatever you want to call it. People live in a state of arrested development, which I can tell you is true. Oh, sorry about that. Gotta take care of this. This is the number one right here. But yeah, that's kind of my broad takeaways of the movie. Like, I don't want to kind of just go on and on. I hope to have a longer, more thoughtful discussion with another person, hopefully in the near future. Do like a little hour-long, just off-the-cuff, kind of like spoiler cast about this movie, because I think it's worth dissecting a little bit with somebody else. It's worth kind of taking it apart a little bit more, getting into more of the details. Like I said, I like the idea of that, like the one is not just the one without the support of the people in their life. I did like that. And I like that, like, in the original trilogy, it was Neo. Neo was the one that needed all the support. He needed Trinity to believe in him, and now he's given an opportunity to kind of believe in her. And it, if I do have actually one of my biggest criticisms of the movie is how underutilized and ephemeral the stuff with Carrie Ann Moss feels. Like, I think they had good chemistry, but her character is basically bookends the movie. And I did not feel like it was very developed very well or very even interesting. Like, her getting pulled out of the Matrix is really boring. Because, it comes to this moment where she has to make a choice about this stuff. Because in this Matrix, she has like a husband and she has children, and these are things that Trinity, the real person, actually also wanted but couldn't have because of, the revolution, the fight, the machines. Because this is actually really this whole thing. Like once Neil Patrick Harris's character, like the analyst, who's basically the villain, he's like the architect of the movie. He kind of reveals that like they were brought back to life by the machines. The machines like actually spent years like bringing them back to life, like putting their bodies back together and healing them, and then basically torturing them for like 50 years or 40 years or however long, trying to figure out why they created a balance in the Matrix. And this whole thing about like self-deception, and people just want the comfort of the reality they have in here. There is no objectivity anymore. Everything has to be through a subjective lens. Objectivity is bad. Objectivity does not allow the Matrix to exist. Because if you were objective about everything, you would see that it's fake. But you want it to be real. You want to buy into the lie. And somehow, Neo and Trinity are kind of part of that. They're part of that system. Just them existing allows that to continue because they're kind of like writ large, like these dreamers, these earnest dreamers that want to be together. So they're like the heart and the soul of the world, basically, of the Matrix and what they represent. And if you bring them together, they they create catastrophe, and because they try to free everything, they try to blow it all up. Basically, love overcomes all. Love overcomes everything. That's kind of the message at the end of the movie. And I thought a lot of that stuff was very interesting. It was super interesting, super fascinating. And I wish it was the focus of the entire movie. I wish the entire movie had been about Neo and Trinity, him having to fall in love with her. Like if you're going to do like a kind of a spin-off sequel, more than just a sequel, because it's not like it's a direct sequel, but it's got its own, like I said, it's got its own flavor. It's got its own vibe, its own thing. Like, dude, make a science fiction love story and not really actually worry too much about shit like EO and like, or were people super fucking curious to go back to fucking the real world? Like, you could have explained that shit in a 2-minute montage. Do we need to go and spend time with Niobe and like, do we need to do any of that shit? Not much of it. Because you could have just had people from the real world coming into the Matrix telling them about the about the real world. And while they're trying to convince Neo to wake up. But maybe Neo doesn't want to wake up because he wants to be with Trinity. Like I'm doing that awful thing where you're like, I wish this happened in the movie. I'm just saying, like, I saw that potential there, and I thought for a long time when I was watching it, I thought that's what was going to happen. It kind of never manifested. Which, in fairness to the movie, that's completely on me. But I will say this in closing: I enjoyed the movie. I thought it had enough interesting stuff to kind of keep you invested, to keep you into it. I had a lot of fun watching it. I know some people were very disappointed. It seems like a super polarizing movie. It's like either you love it or you hate it. Well, guess what? Some of us are just right in the middle. At least I am. I'm in the middle of the movie. I'd give it, if I was being generous or charitable, I'd give it like 3 out of 5 stars. That's what I would say. I think it's totally worth your time, especially if you're a fan of The Matrix. Just go into it knowing that it's its own thing. I don't understand like this whole thing with like the nerds, the YouTube nerd crew, the people that like have all of that cultural share in that space that are very popular. They just want to be pandered to, and they just want like to see the same thing they saw before, but just shinier. I like it when people are bold. I like it when people do their own shit, when they go for it. And I think Lana Wachowski went for it, for better or worse. And that will always be more satisfying to me, even if they don't stick the landing, which I don't think the movie does. It doesn't stick the landing. It starts falling apart. Like 90 minutes in, the movie starts to kind of crumble. But in an entertaining fashion. I would definitely still say you should go watch it. But yeah, that's going to do it for me. I got to get out of here. I'm so happy I actually had a chance to do this. I didn't think I was going to be able to do it. But all right, everybody. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to know more about Zoobox, there's a bunch of links in the description. And we'll see you next time. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, okay? Goodbye.